What's going on? Matt Savoca here from Awesemo.com, bringing you the Week 15 Sunday Night Football FanDuel top plays. This is New Orleans versus Tampa Bay. One of the three losses that Tampa Bay has suffered this season has come at the hands of this same New Orleans Saints team, but it's a very different New Orleans Saints team this time around. Jameis Winston was injured in that game, lost for the season. Now Taysom Hill ultimately the starter. So that's what the New Orleans team is like still. By the Vegas totals, this looks like this could be a steamrolling of a game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are 11.5-point favorites in this game. 46.5-point total. That's nothing to scoff at this week when we don't have a lot of high totals. Okay, guys, before we get into this, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter at Draftaholic, that's always much appreciated as well. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, Jock Market. Jock Market is turning your favorite fantasy sports knowledge into real-life stock marketplaces. You can bet on your favorite athletes for real cash in real time. And when you use promo code Awesemo, you can get a first match deposit bonus up to $50. Get started on Jock Market today in the App Store or on Google Play. Okay, guys, on the screen here, you see my 10 through 6 of my top FanDuel picks. We'll start with number 10 here, Tre'Quan Smith. Tre'Quan Smith has basically been okay since Taysom Hill started as the starter. He is getting 10 targets, which is actually the most of any player on the Saints in the 2 games that Hill has started this season. Still, he's only in the optimal lineup 18% of the time. Marquez Callaway is actually a little bit ahead of him because of his big play ability. And then number 8, Ryan Succop, kicker for the Buccaneers. You could always see kickers rising to the top here. Less likely in the optimal MVP spot, but in the optimal flex play, absolutely here. Rob Gronkowski and Mike Evans are the 2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers top options who don't quite crack the top 5. Who does? Let's watch and find out. Number 5, it's Alvin Kamara, and honestly, this is a little low for Alvin Kamara. The salary is probably the reason why here. A $14,000 salary on FanDuel is pretty steep here. Still, you know what Alvin Kamara is capable of every time he steps onto the field. I mean, he had over 20 fantasy points in his first game back from an ankle sprain since week 9 last week. Now, we have to contextualize that a little bit. He was playing the New York Jets, and the New York Jets tend to make offenses look really good. But still, you can imagine Kamara getting 25, even 30 fantasy points in the best scenarios here. He's getting 25 or more fantasy points in 26% of our simulations. Still, Mark Ingram is back. Tony Jones will likely mix in a little bit, and Taysom Hill is always a threat to steal production on the ground himself. So he's getting under 10 fantasy points in 36.9% of our simulations. There's definitely some downside here, even though Kamara, the player, is as good as you can get at the running back position. We don't usually love playing running backs who are 11.5-point underdogs, but Kamara is an exception because of his receiving ability, a median projection of nearly 14 points. He's in the optimal lineup nearly a third of the time. Number 4, it's Chris Godwin, and Chris Godwin's just had a casual 32 targets over his last 2 games. That's unbelievable. He's caught 25 of those targets and over 250 yards receiving in that short span. Godwin is one of the best receivers in the NFL, no doubt about it, and he's probably going to avoid being covered by Marshawn Lattimore for much of this game here. So just like Alvin Kamara in our last breakdown here, he's getting over 25 fantasy points 26% of the time, and he's under 10 fantasy points under 25% of the time. So his floor is actually a little bit higher than Kamara's, believe it or not. He's the optimal MVP play over 9% of the time, and he's finding himself in the optimal lineup 38% of the time. Chris Godwin could easily see another dozen targets here. No one would be surprised if he ends up as the optimal MVP on Sunday night. Number 3, Leonard Fournette. And Leonard Fournette has a casual 80 fantasy points over his last 3 games here. He's now up to number 1 in the NFL in total targets, number 2 in total red zone touches, number 1 in receptions, and number 5 in total touchdowns among all running backs this season. Fournette has been a beast, and the fact that Gio Bernard is now injured and Ronald Jones is in the eternal doghouse means that Fournette has this backfield locked up so long as he's healthy, and we're seeing that in the simulations. He's only getting under 10 fantasy points in a mere 16.5% of our simulations. That's fantastic for any running back here, especially one in an offense as pass heavy as the Buccaneers. He's over 25 fantasy points nearly 40% of the time. And that's really because he is starting to become one of the big 4 weapons in the receiving game as well. Fournette taking those dump off passes, doing a ton with them, especially over the last 3 weeks. In nearly 50% of our simulations, 48 to be exact, Leonard Fournette, not the passing attack from the Buccaneers, makes it into our optimal lineup. Number 2, it's Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill may not be the world's best real-life quarterback. In fact, he probably isn't, but for fantasy football, he is just chef's kiss here because the rushing upside week after week gives him a floor and ceiling that is really unparalleled, except for just a few players. You know their names: Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, to name a few here. His 4.1 adjusted yards per attempt, yikes, that is not great. But the fact that he can rip off runs like the 46-yard touchdown he had in the second half against the Jets is all you need from a fantasy perspective. He's had over 20 fantasy points in both of his starts already this season. His median projection of 19.2, honestly, that's a little low, and I'm not surprised to see his ceiling scores are significantly higher in 41% of our current simulations. This big underdog quarterback is still scoring 25 or more fantasy points. The Saints run the number 23 ranked offense via PFF's grade, and they're going up against Tampa Bay's top 12 defense in PFF's grades as well. But still, Taysom Hill can get there as a passer in garbage time or as a rusher throughout. So I am not surprised to see him in the optimal lineup 54% of the time. And before I go into the number 1 play on FanDuel for Sunday Night Football, just want to remind you guys, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you guys always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter at Draftaholic, that's always much appreciated as well. And go ahead and comment below, which of these have been your favorite, maybe your least favorite top plays that I mentioned today. Always love to hear from you guys. And thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Jock Market. Get in there, download the app on the App Store or Google Play, and use that promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit bonus up to $50. All right, let's dig into number 1. Number 1, is there really any surprise here? It's Tom Brady. We often see quarterbacks float to the top of the optimal lineup percentages in our simulations, especially on FanDuel, where you don't have to pay that extra salary to get that player into the MVP spot. Nonetheless, the GOAT here just doing GOAT things this season. First in the NFL in pass attempts per game, third in the NFL in deep ball attempts. That's passes over 20 air yards or more. He's had amazing protection this year, number 1 in player profilers protection rate, and he's turned it into incredible production. Number 1 in passing yards, number 1 in passing TDs, and without any rushing upside to speak of, number 2 in fantasy points per game among all quarterbacks here. He's got a fantastic median projection of 21.2 fantasy points and gets over 25 fantasy points 55% of the time. Even with that $17,000 salary, he's getting to that optimal MVP spot 18.8% of the time, and another 43.5% of the time, he is an optimal flex play. Not surprised at all to see him in the optimal lineup nearly 2/3 of the time. Tom Brady is approaching that fade at your own risk level this year. He could smash this Sunday night. That is gonna do it for the Week 15 Sunday Night Football FanDuel top plays. This is a great game every time these two teams have met in the last 2 years. And honestly, the Saints have had their number quietly. I don't think that's the case this time. I think the Buccaneers take this one and take this one easily. As good as Taysom Hill is for fantasy football, I do not think he is able to keep pace with the Buccaneers and their offense. And even though the Saints ranked second in PFF's defensive grade, I don't think it's happening for them tonight. So if you're looking for the DraftKings version of this video, go ahead and look for it on the channel. It's definitely around here somewhere. We will be back tomorrow for the Monday Night Football top plays. Until then, I'm Matt Savoca from Awesemo.com. We'll talk to you guys then.